All right, so you have put out a blog post for how to win a Colosseum Hackathon. It's a pretty reasonably sized article, but it also talks about the important facts of the best ways to win the hackathon. So I think the best way to do this is really for just you to go through those points and just help the viewers and everybody understand how to set themselves up for success for winning one of these hackathons. Like it's a hackathon, it's a startup competition. You can still win these things even if you're not building a business. But so like, let's just talk through all the most important factors that you've seen over the last 3 years that lead to the success of teams coming out of these things.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first thing to know about our hackathons, and this is how the guide opens up, is that they're not like traditional hackathons that you may have participated in the past. So structurally, they've sort of evolved from what is like a typical hackathon where you go to some cafeteria and in some company or a university computer lab, and then you basically hack for 48 hours with some friends and maybe win some bounties. And it's a very ephemeral experience versus what our hackathons are obviously all online. They're over the course of 5 to 6 weeks, and they're much more about like bringing your own idea that you want to work on for the next 5 to 10 years, raise venture funding around, and go build a startup around. And so that's definitely the focus. So it's much more long-term focus in terms of what types of products we want to see by the end of it, or at least product visions that we want to see. And so in the guide, we've sort of broken down the recommendations to 4 different categories. One is team composition, the second is product ideation, the third is prioritization execution, and product submission. And so we can kind of go through each one of those sections, but it's important to know that before getting into it specifically, while our hackathons are focused on founders and founding teams who are using it as their first engineering sprint to go launch a company, um, we do have a fair amount of people who join who don't fit that bill, who never really potentially even intend to be a founder, right? They're either new developers who just want to experiment with the technology and learn about crypto development environments. And then there's also people who are actually really good developers. They just want to build something like an open source tool that's applicable to a bunch of different projects, but they don't really intend to monetize it. Or developers who are really high level who want to get hired by ecosystem companies. And so not everyone who participates in the hackathon is a founder, but a vast majority of actually the prizes are specifically targeting founders and their teams and their products. And so that's what the bulk of this article and guide is about.
Yeah, but like what are some like important factors like you and I have discussed on the past, like anything related to teams, like social presence and some of the like key
Yep.
important factors that people need to be thinking about?
Yeah, on the team side, I mean, initially, they were pretty small. It was usually just one person submitting a project, but now they've grown to usually team sizes of 3 to 4 for winning projects, which means that there's sort of a division of labor in terms of what our people are doing. So usually a couple technical co-founders, they're focused primarily on the sprint, the engineering sprint, making sure that they're prioritizing the features that they need to get out a working demo by the end of the hackathon. But then you also have usually a 1 or 2 non-technical founders. Maybe they're a designer or someone who has experience in marketing or business development or operations or finance or something, and they are sort of leading the business effort. So they are out there, creating a Twitter account early on, trying to get some initial beta users to get feedback on that product. They're usually creating uh, um, the product pitch at the end. They're creating the slide deck, the walkthrough video, etc. And yeah, they're very much, and that's really important, right? Because we want to see teams who are very high functioning, that are working well together, and that have necessary skills to go compete in the broader marketplace and get product market fit.
Yeah, I think one important thing that I sort of like hammer on about is like if you are a team of entirely engineers, consider leveraging the Colosseum platform to go find somebody on the BD operations marketing side that like wants to do that work. Because if nobody on your team has the interest of being a founder, you're going to need that person. So just like team construction is highly important,
Yep.
and leverage Colosseum's platform and able to do that. So on the social side, though, like this is like what we've seen some successful teams do very early stage. What about that?
Yeah, so this is leading a little bit into the prioritization and execution is that yeah, teams can leverage like creating an X account very early on in order to one just let people know that you're building this. So it's sort of a market, the initial marketing push. But more importantly is that you're putting out sort of the bat signal to potential beta testers, right? And people who, feel like they could actually use the product if you end up building it, they'll come to you and you'll start forming your initial community to get feedback on what's being built in the hackathon. And we've actually seen this many, many times where teams will create a Twitter, an X account. They'll get some user feedback that will actually radically alter the direction of where their product goes. And that's really good because you're already in the process of trying to find product market fit and finding the core group of users that are going to love your product. And so as much as it is a marketing exercise, it's more about like a product kind of direction exercise, especially early on.
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead to that portion, but you have some other points in your blog talking about product ideation. So let's talk about that a little bit.
For sure. So yeah, like we were saying before, once you sort of have your team and figured out what the composition looks like, you got to you got to have an idea, right? And there's a bunch of blog posts and articles and tweet threads that have been written over time about how to find good startup ideas. The truth of the matter is like, actually no one knows. There's some certain strategies you can look at, but no one knows if a particular startup idea is going to succeed or not. However, there are some sort of frameworks and pieces of advice that we like to give founders that are especially going through Colosseum, that we've found time and time again have helped early teams. And the first one of those pieces of advice is build a product that leverages crypto to create a new market, or bring in an existing market on chain to make it more efficient. And so I think people sort of forget what the intended use of crypto is. And, you can go back to the beginning of like Bitcoin, right? Like, what is Bitcoin fundamentally? It is a new market for non-sovereign store of value. And that's all it does, though. Like, that is the one use case on Bitcoin. That is what it's focused on. But the great thing about new, smart contract, general purpose blockchains like Solana is that you can create many, many different markets using many, many new digital assets. And so that's sort of what you should have in mind when you're thinking about your product. Like, what market am I opening up, or what market am I making more efficient? So that's one piece of advice that we highly recommend. The second thing is that you should build products that are personal to you. So the startup journey is like very long, and you need to stay very, very passionate and interested in it on a personal level. And so choosing something that you yourself would use if you were successful in building it is very important. Also, it helps you find product market fit because you probably aren't the only person in the world that wants to see that product built. There's probably at least 10 to 20 other people, even if it's like super niche, that would care about it. Obviously, you want to build in a niche that's a growing, right? Like, I think the example that we gave in the article is about Tensor, where the founders of Tensor were like very pro level NFT traders, but there wasn't necessarily a marketplace that had all the features that they wanted to use. And so they were like, well, we want this product. And it turns out that actually a majority of volume, even while it's a smaller number of users total, are contributing a vast majority of the volume to the NFT market, is this kind of like prosumer audience that we're part of. And so that's part of the reason why it's grown so quickly, is that they built something for them in a niche that was growing very quick with, obvious demand to capture market share. And so that's the second piece of advice. Third piece is, which is sort of related to the previous point, where you got to have some amount of prior experience or domain expertise in the area that you're building. So one of the most common pieces of advice is like, you can't just find product market fit immediately. The team needs to have strong founder market fit to know about all the intricacies of competing in that particular vertical, the opportunities in that vertical. And so that's also really important. A concrete example of this we see in the hackathon is we look for teams who potentially, as an example, worked for a indie game shop, right? And they've been working there for 20 years or 10 years. And so they know how to build an indie game. Well, can they go build a crypto native game now? I think they'll have a lot more context about how to do that well, given their experience in the traditional gaming market. And then, the last two, are good pieces of advice, especially for people who have been building in the hackathons over multiple hackathons. And the first of being, don't be afraid to actually build something that has already been tried. So we fundamentally sort of agree with like Mark Andreessen about this, where there's a lot of great ideas tried at one point, but it was just too early. And so if you can identify where the previous team sort of failed in that product vision, if you believe in that product vision and have the ability to go execute, it's definitely possible to create a successful version. I mean, the history of technology is littered with these examples, right? Like so many 2000 bubble tech companies ended up the same concept, ended up being successful like 20 years later. And so that's really one thing to think about. And the last thing is just like aim really big. And, if you're building a startup, you want to make sure that, there's a very large market that either you're capturing or you're creating new for yourself. And so really aim for a wildly ambitious product is sort of our last piece of advice.
Okay, cool. And I think maybe the last part of the blog post, and I think it's like one of the more like short-term impactful things, or maybe that's the wrong wording, but it's like the presentation. Like, as we've talked about, you and I have talked about this countless times, is that this is the first thing that every judge, every VC, every person sees, is that presentation. And you need to make sure that you're in a very short version, giving all the information necessary for somebody to make a decision to say, yes, this thing is good. I think it deserves to be in the top like 100 or 200 of the projects. And then that moves them on to the code review portion.
Right. So the product presentation is incredibly important. We get, the last hackathon, Hyperdrive, received almost 1,000 product submissions. So, the first layer, as you said, of evaluation is like, is this even a good idea in the first place? And you have to express that and verbalize that through the product presentation. That's what judges are going to look at, first before anything else. And so there's some suggestions in the guide about how to structure your pitch deck. You can follow those specifically, which basically covers like, what's your team background, what's your product description, why you started building the product, why there's a potential market that is unlocked by your product, how you're going to get initial usage, or as we were mentioning before, are you already getting some initial usage through your work on social media of getting some beta testers, getting feedback. And then obviously the last piece of it, which is like, show off your working demo of what features you decided to prioritize to build during the hackathon, but that also relates to the longer term vision of what you're trying to build with this startup and product long term. And so you can follow that's usually the components that we found in successful pitch videos. But you can be creative. You can express your idea and tell your story however you want. So we don't want to give too many pieces of advice here, because we have found that people can creatively come up with different ways to tell their product story. But regardless of how you tell it, please keep it under 3 minutes, which is the max, because with hundreds of product submissions, we're just not going to be able to watch anything that's like an hour long. which we've received many hour-long
Or 5
submissions.
minutes long for that
Yeah,
matter.
or 5 minutes. Yeah, 3 minutes is like should be enough time to concisely tell your story, go through your demo, and explain why your product's going to be the next big breakout. Yeah, startup in crypto.
But assuming that you are looking and you're targeting not just winning, but actually making it into the accelerator, should those early stage presentations, because I know people in the accelerator will get a chance to refine
Yes.
these and make them but like in the actual hackathon competition itself, should people be speaking in their presentation about who their customers are, where the market is, and like how they're going to monetize, or is that more so later down the road whenever they're sort of presenting these to like a different demographic, like to the VCs essentially?
Yeah, so that is one of the components that we recommend is like how you will get initial product traction and usage. 90% of products don't have any traction at this point. Occasionally someone does, who've actually gone through that process of launching a Twitter account immediately, iterating on the product. It really depends on the product you're building, but like some things can be produced pretty quickly and get some usage. And so yeah, definitely tell us about it if there is any, but more just for most people, explain how you're going to do it, but don't spend more than, I would say, like 30 seconds on that piece of it. It's more about like what the market opportunity is, why you built it, why your team's the best fit to go build this product, and obviously your demo of what you built. So those are the important parts.
Do you have any like final sort of like words of advice you'd like to give everybody watching?
Yeah, I'd say just know that this is, over the last few hackathons have been the largest in the world in terms of participants and submissions. And so it's super, super competitive. And one thing that we do look at is not just one hackathon, but how a team iterates and goes through the idea maze over multiple different hackathons. There's been many examples of winning teams who have become really top ecosystem products who have entered multiple hackathons with different products, but still pivoting each along the way. And so my last piece of advice is that even if you don't win on your first hackathon, keep going at it, keep iterating your product, because that's how it's going to, potentially succeed in the long term in the second or third hackathon that you participate in. So all we
Many
can say is,
many such many
many
such
cases.
cases of people who just didn't give up.
Yeah.
I can name Tensor, Fluxbeam,
Yeah.
like Juicer maybe
Yeah.
also. Like
Yeah.
there's just like the list goes on and on and on. So if you get frustrated because you didn't win and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into this, just know that that's probably a natural feeling. But at the same time, that should be motivation for you to be like, was it the wrong idea? Was it the wrong timing? What was it? And then just shoot your shot in the next one, and you'll be a seasoned veteran at that point, and you have a higher chance of success. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's my personal take.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as you think about, Colosseum and the teams that we actually accept into the accelerator, we don't accept all winners of a hackathon. There's usually 30 to 40 individual prize winners. We'll take the top 10 to 15 teams and invest in them and accept them in. But that's something we really, really will look for is like who has, come back time and time again and is, looking to compete in these and really excel with a new product. And so, you know, putting my investor hat on, the point at which we're investing, which is the earliest stage possible, it's almost like pre-seed. It's a lot about the people and their personality and their drive. And so that speaks volumes when they've entered multiple hackathons.
Yeah, because like that's great advice. It's like you're investing in the people and their
Yep.
motivation, and like maybe the product is like pretty good, but not quite there. But that can come after the fact, as like many great products do. They start as one thing, and within like a couple months, some ideas are tweaked, it's evolved. So like those early stage things, you're really investing a lot of times in the people more than you are the product itself.
100%. 100%. And it's, yeah, a personality trait of someone who wants to go compete in the most competitive hackathon in the world time and time again is like definitely someone we want to back.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool, Matty. Thanks for sharing those insights. And talk to you later, dude.
Awesome. Thanks, Chase.
Cheers.